want to talk about a few things, American politics. First of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about Dr. Fauci. I think all of us around the world, we all experienced COVID. None of us was spared from it. And I want to say this about Dr. Fauci and what happened to him in Congress is, as an outsider from Australia, right? Every country had like a health minister or someone in charge of, what was going on with the health thing. In America, it was Fauci. In Australia, we had someone different, right? In Europe and Scandinavia, you also had other people who were, in charge of the health department. And America is the only country that is trying to attack a health person, right? Because of things that happened during a once in 100-year pandemic. Now, this is not to say that Anthony Albanese, that Fauci did everything 100% correct. Of course, he didn't. Every single person on the planet in government made mistakes because they were dealing with something that was brand new, right? They were dealing with something that no one else had ever experienced before. So you had a new virus with, with that was like changing, and therefore different circumstances were happening. So to blame someone, right? To blame someone like that over that is completely ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. The best way for countries to learn from things like that is in Australia, we had a independent commission after COVID, and the independent commission wasn't political, wasn't left wing, right wing, or anything. They were tasked to find out, okay, what did we do right and what did we do wrong? That's all it was. It wasn't to blame people. It was to say, what have we done right and what have we done wrong? And the reason for it was not to demonize someone. It was to go, if it happens again, what can we learn from what we did in the last time? So then we're more prepared for the next one, right? So, instead in America, there has been no like independent commissions. It's just like, let's just do show trials. Let's do show trials like they did in the Soviet Union, right? That's all it is. They're just show trials. And they're show trials, by the way, by people who pushed ivermectin, who said things like the vaccines were not safe. So they were lying themselves. So think about this. How many people, like Rand Paul was a big supporter of ivermectin. All the peer-reviewed studies show that ivermectin did not work in terms of COVID. And so how many people like him, how many people did he say ivermectin is a good thing to take for COVID? And people who follow him, what if they thought, you know what? I'm not going to get vaccinated because I can use ivermectin instead. So how many people didn't get vaccinated because of things like people like Rand Paul said? So if anyone needs to take responsibility for things that happened during COVID, it's the people who put who made the vaccines out to be something they weren't, and who offered solutions that didn't actually help. So I would say that people like Rand Paul, right, have done more damage, a lot more damage, than people like Fauci did. And again, this is not to say that Fauci is some sort of saint and like everything he did was 100%. No, there were mistakes made. Everyone knows it happened to every country. Every country made mistakes. And I think, in my opinion, I think one of the things that America needs to learn from this is, in my country, the health minister is not treated as a god and they're not treated as the devil. They're just a health minister. And I think this is a uniquely American thing, where someone is treated like a god and then they're treated like the devil. In my opinion, someone like Fauci should be just treated like a health person, like neither a god or that, because what happens is, if you treat that person like a god, that will give the other side ammunition to go, you guys thought he was amazing and he did all this wrong. I think the idea is, in government, is no one should be treated either God or like that, because their job is to look up. This is their job, right? And so, as much as I don't want Fauci criticized or put in jail for things like that, right, I do see the argument that we shouldn't lionize people this way as well, because it helps the other side, right? It helps the other side to do it. So in Australia, if you ask me if you ask me who the health person in charge was, I have to think about it. And the reason I have to think about it is because they weren't in the news that much, right? So again, we need to understand that this politicization, this sort of celebrity thing, is that in America has a celebrity thing, right? Does and look, it's understandable. You have a reality TV star as the president, and therefore, a lot of things, Pete Hegseth was a TV star on Fox News or whatever. You have Dr. Oz, who was a reality TV star. You had Dr. Phil going around, with ICE doing hard, psychology things. Like America has a uniquely celebrity based thing, right? And when Fauci came in, some people, they wanted to do these massive spreads about him and how great. And look, I think it was good. But I think it's a bad mistake to do that as well, because you're actually putting a target on that person, right? You're putting a target on that person. If you build someone up too much, they will be easier to knock down. In my opinion, if you look around the world, Australia, the UK, Europe, Scandinavia, most people don't know who their own country's health minister is, right? Because it's just someone doing their job. So I think the best way to protect those people is to just go, okay, Fauci's our health guy. He has a whole bunch of people around him. He's doing his best, and everyone makes mistakes. That's it, right? That's it. And in that way, people like Rand Paul and all these other people, they can't attack him for being this like arrogant person, whatever it is. Um, so yeah, that's my thing on it, right? I think the idea that you would like take someone to court and imprison someone for just doing the best that they can do it's insane thing, right? Again, there's nothing wrong with learning from your mistakes, right? The best thing to do is to learn from your mistakes. And in America, unfortunately, it's either Fauci did nothing wrong or he did everything, or he should be in prison, right? The reality is more nuanced than that, right? The reality is, and also I'll tell you something that we could learn from COVID, and this happened in Australia as well, is that in the old days, before social media, right, sometimes health officials would tell us little porkies. They tell us little porkies, like, for example, because they think it's better for us, right? It's better for us because, and let me understand, like the mask thing, like Fauci said, Fauci said about the mask, right? Now, the reason he said don't use N95 masks and things like that was because there was a shortage of masks, right? Hospitals had shortages and all that sort of stuff. So that's the reason, right? That's the reason that he was saying that. So it's perfectly understandable why Fauci said that. But he was telling porkies, but he was telling porkies, and porkies in Australia means lies. He was telling porkies because he was concerned about the hospitals would not have enough masks. Now, in the old days, before social media, I think that was an effective tactic. I actually would agree with it. However, these days, that's the worst thing you can do. Because what it does, because social media, everyone now is invested in this stuff, right? People, it's no longer mainstream media telling, governments work, and they're saying something and everyone just goes, well, that's what it is. Now a lot of us are on 24/7 news. And so what happens is, if a government minister, even if they have the right, they're thinking the right thing in their heads, they're thinking this is the best thing we need to do. What it does is create mistrust. It creates mistrust in the government. And I think if we learn anything from COVID is that we can't use tactics that we used to do. Even if telling people something is going to have a bad effect, we have to do it. Because the alternative is we're going to end up with a whole bunch of people like MAGA, right? We're going to end up with Rand Pauls and like conspiracy theorists and all that. It fuels the conspiracy theorists. Right. So we have to be completely honest with people, 100% honest with people about what we're saying. Right. 100%. We have to be 100% honest with people. Right. And it doesn't matter what the circumstances of that are, because we need, in my opinion, governments need to get more trust of people, right? So if someone comes out and says, there's a thing with masks, we should just tell the truth. We should say, look, under normal circumstances, we would say you should wear an N95 mask. However, at the moment, we have a shortage of masks for hospitals, so we'd prefer you didn't do that. I think that would have been a better thing to do in hindsight. Again, I understand why they did it because before social media, you could get away with that. Now it just creates a lot of mistrust, right? So you're better. The other thing they did wrong, social media companies, right? Social media companies trying to stop conversations about where it came from. Again, I understand the thought behind it, but in this day and age, all that does is create mistrust in people. So the best thing to do is just be honest with people, let people make the decisions on their own, and then governments will start getting trust again. I think one of the worst things that's happened as someone who believes in government, who believes that government can do good things for people, is to create trust in these people. And I think what Fauci and what they were trying to do is they were trying to say, oh, they lied to us, they did this, they did that. And they're trying to use that as a way. For someone like Rand Paul, this is great. You know why? Because Rand Paul is a libertarian. And as a libertarian, Rand Paul doesn't like government. He would like to see the government almost not exist to a very small degree, right? So he's like, the more mistrust he can put on government, even his own government, the better for him, because then they will, because Rand Paul doesn't want to think that, like, if people start thinking, well, governments can be good, then they're not going to do things Rand Paul does because Rand Paul is a libertarian. So I think left-wing governments around the world have to learn lessons from this, is that you have to accept the fact, right? You have to accept the fact that we live in a new media world. And in this new media world, you have to just let things go out there. And sometimes those things might be bad. Someone might say ivermectin. Hi, Donna. Good to see you, Donna. Hi, T. Good to see you, T. Ivermectin works, whatever. You have to let it go. Unfortunately, you have to, because the alternative is you have half the country turn into conspiracy theorists. And that's actually worse, right? Again, I think you have to be intelligent in how you do your tactics. And in this, hi, Donna, good to see you. So that's my point of view on that. I think it would be good to get back to normality, where we don't demonize health ministers. You don't try to. The idea that you would imprison someone for stuff that happened during a pandemic is insane. This is like North Korea stuff, right? This is like what they do in Russia, or not even Russia. I don't think they do this in Russia. It's like really like crazy stuff, right? And again, Rand Paul is the guy who's like, freedom and all this sort of stuff. And yet he wants to imprison people. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So that's my point of view on Fauci. Hi, Zelda. Thank you for joining, Zelda. Appreciate that. Thank you, DM, for joining. Appreciate that. So I want to talk a little bit about Spain as well. Hola, ¿cómo estás? I know I speak a little bit of Spanish. On Spain, we saw muy bien. Muchos carrozos. Muchos bien. Muchos. Gracias. 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 Muchos gracias. Muchos gracias. Sí. So in Spain at the moment, about a week ago, we saw a situation where about 30, or I think it's like 50,000, I can't remember the exact number. They went into, hi, Zelda. Good to see you again, Zelda. Great to see you. I don't know what that emoji is. Is that like a dolphin? Is that like a dolphin? I can't know. Yeah. Is that a dolphin jumping a water? Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So in Spain, you saw basically 30, 50,000 people go into an enclave of Spain called Suelta. In Spain, they call it Suelta. And it's basically a territory of Spain, but it's actually in Morocco. So it's in Africa. It's not in Spain. Now, the usual people, like Elon Musk and all those type of people, they completely lost it. They completely lost it. I mean, really, really lost it. They were like, here we go. Here's the start of the invasion. And this is what's going to happen in America if the Democrats get in and all that sort of stuff. Like, there is the amount of lying that goes on is incredible. First of all, uh, the majority, the vast majority, those people were told on social media that if you go into Suelta and you go in there, you will then be able to become a Spanish citizen. And that they were told this. There was lies. That's what they were told, right? And so the Moroccan government actually, they just opened the gates up and said, go in. So I don't know. I think I have heard this happens, is that when Morocco and Spain negotiate on things, sometimes they'll open the gates up as a way to say to Spain, if you don't do what we want, we're going to let a whole bunch of people come into your country or into your territory, and they use it as like a negotiating tool. Um, what you won't hear, what you won't hear from people on that side is that almost all of them within 24 hours went back to Morocco. They didn't go into Spain. They didn't go into Europe. It never happened. So again, they went back. The Prime Minister of Spain, hi Tommy, that's true. The Prime Minister of Spain basically was actually, who's very pro-immigrant, is a very pro-immigrant person. Hi Karen Ev, thanks for joining. The Prime Minister of Spain is a very pro-immigrant person. And he basically was very tough. He said, no, you can't come into this country. And look, that's fair enough. You can't have 50,000 people coming in one day in a country the size of Spain. That would cause trouble. So he was very tough. And so, again, you have these people like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, a lot of the right wing, Nigel Farage in the UK, who are pushing this anti-immigration stuff and trying to make it out like this is going to happen in America or Australia, in England. You know what I mean? They use it as a bit of a scare tactic. They use it a bit of a scare tactic thing to do. Yeah, which I think is wrong. Which I think is wrong thing to do. So yeah, so I think there's a lot of that. I will say this thing about Spain, as someone who has some family in Spain. Yo hablo, sí. Mi familia, yo tengo familia que vive en España. Yo tengo familia que vive en Barcelona y Madrid. Sí, familia. So that's my Spanish. It's pretty good. So yeah, so some of those people in Spain, they, from that point of view, actually have it actually has the strongest economy in all of Europe. So Spain is the most pro immigration party, and they have the best economy in all of Europe. So that just goes to show, right? That just goes to show that being pro immigration can be good for your economy. Within reason, or obviously within reason. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about was Abdul El Sayed, who's running in Michigan at the moment against Haley Stevens. So interesting. It's very interesting to see that one there. I don't know what your feelings are towards Abdul El Sayed, whether you're a big fan of him or not. Hi, Tamara. Thank you so much for joining, Tamara. Really appreciate that. Yeah, so Abdul El Sayed. I mean, I'd love to know what people think of Abdul El Sayed. Now, there is this big thing happening in the Democratic Party at the moment, and it's to do with people who are more progressive, or some would say socialist, versus the establishment of the Democratic Party. Now, I myself, I kind of feel a bit conflicted in this area. A lot of grassroots support for Abdul. That's true. There is a lot of grassroots support for Abdul. Um, I do want to say this, like I don't see, because here's the thing. I'm a social democrat, right? And so a social democrat is basically a capitalist who believes in strong safety nets, like healthcare, right? Affordable homes, right? Helping people who are unemployed, that sort of thing. That's what I believe in, right? Don't live in Michigan, but I'm a UAW member. I'm for Abdul. Okay, yeah, yeah. So someone like Abdul would do quite well in Australia, right? Would do quite well in Australian politics. My concern is not Abdul El Sayed or Zohran Mandami. Um, I will say my concern is that as someone who's a social democrat, I do feel like if you go on the DSA website, the Democratic Socialist American Party, there are some really, I would say, funky things on there, like things that I would strongly disagree with, right? And it's on their website, right? Like things like abolishing prisons, right? Abolishing the police, and a couple of other things. So that to me is a concern. Now, I'm not saying Abdul thinks like that. I'm not saying Zora Mandami thinks like that. I'm just saying that the Democratic Socialists, the DSA, Abdul is not a DSA member. You know, yeah, I know he's not. Yeah. I know Abdul is not. But I know a lot of the other members, the DSA. There are a lot of DSA members in there, and that is a concern to me, right? So, for example, there's a guy, he's a streamer. His name's Hassan Piker in America, and he's quite popular amongst this type of group. I don't like Hassan Piker's politics. I think you can be very progressive, right, without being like the Soviet Union was good, right? Or Cuba is good, right? I'm not interested in that side of the left, right? Because here's the thing, right? Communism is not good, right? It's not good. It's not a positive thing, right? Socialism at its extreme is not a good thing, right? So from my point of view, it's like just tell us what you think, right? I don't care if someone is very progressive, and because I'm a progressive, I believe in Medicare for all. We have it in Australia, right? But I don't believe that the government should overtake private businesses, right? I don't believe that, TVs should be built by the government. I don't believe that furniture should be built by the government. I don't believe cars should be built by the government. I think private industry. I'm not down with the DSA either. I'm down with the new deal, like most people on the left. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. T. Yeah, I just think there are parts of the left, and I'm talking about the Hassan Piker type of the left, that does actually concern me a bit because to me, I kind of feel like I look at Donald Trump on the right, and I think they're the left wing version of Donald Trump, right? A left wing version of Donald Trump. Yeah. Um, so I am concerned about this stuff. I do think it's a problem, and the reason I think it's a problem is because a lot of the enthusiasm in the Democratic Party is mostly young people, and some of them, they're like, oh yeah, it's not too bad, whatever. I will say this: I think a lot of this comes from what is it? The allocation resources is about economics. You can't count whatever utopian terms you look like all sounds good, but it's really about who owns the means of production. And we've shown that socialism and communism are economic constructions do not work exactly. A lot of progressives in the US see ourselves as New Deal 2.0. Yeah. Yeah, but like I will say, so I agree with Zelda and I 100% agree with what Tamara said. 100% agree with what she said. She's from Alaska. And so it's very, Alaska, people from Alaska say a lot of sensible things. And I believe Tamara is one of those people. Except for Sarah Palin. Yeah. But there's always the exception. Do you know what I mean? There's always the exception, Sarah Palin, who had a very good view of Russia from her home. Very good view from Russia from her home. So that made her an expert on international relations. So if you can see Russia, or you're close to Russia, that makes you more informed on what's going on in Russia. Okay. So yeah, thank you, Tamara. Thank you. Appreciate your support on that. But yeah, so I look, I love the fact that America has progressive candidates. I do. But I will just say this. There are some of the candidates and that do concern me a bit. They do actually concern me a bit. I mean, there are candidates who've talked about getting rid of of prisons. I'm going to say no to that one. So we have to be careful that you don't open the door, right, to something that is not good. Because I think you know what I think it is. I think a lot of people who vote for these people, some of these people, they don't know about this stuff. Right, they don't actually I remember Hassan Piker. A lot of people might not know who he is. Hassan Piker is like a young online influencer who's mostly on Twitch, right? And he's always called himself like a socialist, right? He just so you know, he's said really nice things about Mao. He thinks Mao was good, right? Mao. They will never get rid of prisons. They make too much money. Yeah, yeah. But also we need people in prison. We need people in prison. Yeah. I'll say this, right? Um, it, some people will be for no prisons until somebody tries to hurt them, and then suddenly they're very for prison, right? And also saying no prisons, if that became like a big part of your platform, you'd never get voted in. You'd never get voted in with that platform, right? So again, like I just feel like it is a bigger. The reason I'm talking about this is because I think we can all understand is that because I don't think Donald Trump is going to run again. I think it's too old. So I think the era of Donald Trump is coming to a close. So talking about Donald Trump all the time to me feels like I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about Donald Trump, but I feel like it's a bit exhausting sometimes talking about him. I get exhausted talking about him. Also, I've said this before, he just lies all the time. Trump lies all the time. So w- why have a conversation about something he says when we don't know when he's probably lying? It's like we're talking about like if you had a 3-year-old toddler at home and your toddler was saying something, no one, the rest of the family wouldn't be talking about what that toddler said. The toddler said something like something crazy, something wild, because it's a toddler, and we know that toddler doesn't really mean anything, right? They don't actually a lot of times, right? However, with Donald Trump, he's like a toddler, and he just lies all the time. Yet he can say the same lie 100 times, and too many of us will go, "Oh, did you hear what he said?" And it's like, yeah, he's been saying the same thing for like 4 years or 10 years or whatever. So I just don't want to play that game anymore. I feel like he's sucking us into his little world. Like it's an attention thing. You know what I mean? It's like there's no such thing as bad publicity. There's only publicity, and I think Trump is very good at that. But to me, it's exhausting. I find it boring. That's why I don't talk about him very much. And also because he's not going to run again, I feel like there are more important things to talk about. For example, what is the Democratic Party? What is the new Democratic Party? Because we're seeing a change in the Democratic Party. Now, a lot of people will say it's good. Uh, what we need is more than a two-party system we have right now because both parties are failing apart. So that's a very cool. Thank you, Zelda, for bringing that up. I often will talk about this. In Australia, we have preferential voting, and preferential voting is where a small party, like a minor party, can give their preferences to a bigger party. Therefore, we have a lot more than just the two-party system, right? Yes, and so why people keep giving his words credibility globally? Yes, and so why do people give it globally? Yes, yeah, we shouldn't. No one, yeah, we shouldn't be giving his words. I just think like if you're a reporter and you work for a mainstream newspaper, it's kind of your job to report what he says because he's the president. So I get that, but from just a normal person's point of view, I don't see like I just don't buy into it anymore. I will the way I look at it now is I'll wait till he does something, right? I'm not gonna I'm not gonna take anything he says seriously. If he does something, then I'll comment on what he does something. But I'm not going to comment on him posting at 2 o'clock in the morning something that he's been saying for 4 months. If he actually does it, then I'll comment on that. I think it's the best way to deal with him. It's also I can't tell you how many people are exhausted by Donald Trump. Like just doing the whole thing, the 24 thing, you know what I mean? It's exhausting. Since I stopped talking about him as much, I feel so much better. So much better. Yeah. Because I'm not buying into the whole attention thing. I'm not buying into him anymore, right? I'm not buying into his games, right? When he puts on a 2028 hat, he's not going to run again. He's not going to run again, right? I guarantee you. 99, he's not going to run again. But he wants us to say that he is. Turning on and off with the war like a force or influence the market. Yes, influence, exactly. Yeah, exactly right. And, I've got to say something. You would think that the market would be smart enough not to he'll say something, for example, we like he's saying that at the moment. I'm having negotiations with Iran, and then gas prices go down, right? Gas prices will go down, right? June, he will leave. I 99, but he will leave. He will leave. Yeah. And you know why he will leave? He's too old. He's too old. He will leave. 100% he's going to leave. If you actually, even like the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal, they're a bit more, it's a bit more serious journalism. It's right wing journalism, but it's a little bit more, it's not like Fox News, it's a little bit more serious. They actually know a lot of people in the Trump administration, and all of them have said that Trump is planning on leaving. And some of them have actually said he's actually looking forward to leaving. He wants to go and play golf. He wants to leave and spend all his time playing golf. Yeah, I guarantee you, all the stuff coming out of the Trump administration, including his family, is that he's planning on leaving. Yeah, so he just he just puts that on. He trolls us. He does it. I saw it. He did a correspondence dinner and put on a 2028 hat, and then everyone laughed, and he laughed. It's a troll. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for his trolling. Honestly, you're giving him credibility. Right? And here's the other thing. If we start saying he's not going to leave and he leaves, we know what he's going to say. Well, you guys said I wasn't going to leave and I left. So who was telling the truth? So you can end up falling for his lies, right? Like, he said he wasn't you said he wasn't going to leave. Well, hey, I left. And you know what happens? At the next election, Marco Rubio's running, and JD Vance is running, and it's a primary and he's stepping aside. And you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, well, you know what? Let's just say JD Vance he wins the primary and he's up against the Democrat at the next election. You know what he's going to say? He's going to say, well, you guys thought he wasn't going to leave and he left. How is that going to make us look? It's going to make him look better because he left, and it's going to make us look silly because we bought into it. Right? So you got to be careful that we don't end up giving him a weapon to fight back with. Like not Trump, but someone like JD Vance. Right? Because then he will say to us, well, you guys all said he was an authoritarian. You guys all said he was a dictator. But he stepped aside. He stepped aside. And then we look like idiots. So I'm just saying, don't fall for the troll. Do not fall for the trolling. Because, for someone like JD Vance, this is going to be gold for him. He will use this as a weapon to say Trump was an authoritarian because he left, and all of us thought he wasn't going to leave. So who's going to look better, him or us? So I don't buy into it. I will never buy into it. He's 99.9% leaving. Everyone. So again, his own family are already planning for him to leave. This is coming from right wing news. The people, JD Vance, they're already. So if you notice how the way JD Vance is talking right now, he's talking like he's running at the next election. Why? Because he's being told that Trump is moving aside. Trust me, all the signs are Trump is leaving. 99%. Do not fall for it. He's leaving, right? And the best thing we can do is just accept the fact he's leaving. Now, because he's leaving, we need to be starting to talk about the next person, JD Vance, and who the Democrats are going to go up against, right? That is more interesting to me because that's the future. Trump is the past. And just talking about Trump when he's going to go, and he's probably at the midterms is going to be a lame duck president. he's no longer the main game. The main game now is who is the Democrat who's going to go up against JD Vance or Marco Rubio, right? And what does the Democratic Party stand for? Because here's the thing, Trump is not going to be at the next election. So we can't be sitting there at the next election talking about Trump when he's not going to be the guy we're up against. So what do we stand for? I'm pretending like I'm a Democrat because I wish I was a Democrat, right? But let's just pretend I'm American for a second, right? And I would like to think our party, me and myself, by the way, John Ossoff, his mum is Australian. His mum is an Aussie. She was born here. She was born here and grew up and then married an American man. She's an Aussie. So John Ossoff is half Australian. I'm going for John Ossoff just based on that. Any thoughts on who that might be? I think it's a bit early to say, to be honest, Tamara, because you know what? I think it's early. Yeah, I think it's early. I personally, this is what's interesting to me. This is the most interesting part about the next couple of years. Where is the heart of the Democratic Party? Because if you look at people like younger people, it's to do with Israel and Palestine. What Israel and Palestine is the big thing for young Democratic people, right? However, in America, you have the electoral college system. And the electoral college system means that you have to win swing states in conservative areas. Most of the swing states are conservative in terms of socially conservative, right? They're not places where people say free Palestine all the time, right? That's not the places where they say that. There's some places like Dearborn, Michigan. Sure, there are places like that where there's a large percentage of people from Muslim community, but just in general, that alone is not going to win you the key swing states. I think what's going to happen so I will say this is that I guess what happens at the next election is going to depend on also what is happening in the Middle East. Israel-Palestine is not the only issue for young people. I wouldn't say it's the only issue. Now, when I say young people, I'm talking about progressive young people. I'm talking about the people who are voting for Zohran Mamdani, Abdul El Sayed, and a whole bunch of other people in the DSA type people. I know Abdul is not part of the DSA, but he's very close to the DSA, right? He's very close to the party. I'm talking about those people are very, very much influenced by what is happening in Israel and Palestine. Very much so. Now that doesn't mean young people across the board, but if you look at polling for Democrats, Israel Palestine is very high up. Young people. Right, young people. I'm talking about Gen Z mostly, to some extent millennials is a very big thing for them, right? Because you have to remember, right? You have to remember that young people, especially like university students, that yes, they want economic things are very important to them, but they're also more ideologically driven, right? They're more ideologically driven. And so, again, I guess what I don't actually think the data shows any of this information, but what is the Democratic Party moving forward? What is it? Is it more DSA? Is it more establishment? Is it something in between, right? Is it highly focused on what's happening in Israel, Palestine? Is it about economics, right? Because at the moment, you have people in this left-wing part of the Democratic Party who are attacking establishment Democrats, right, more than they're attacking the right wing. So I've heard this. Let me give you an argument, right? I've heard, think about this. Let's say it's 2028 and it's JD Vance, yep, versus Josh Shapiro. Let's just say Josh Shapiro is our Democrat, right? Now Josh Shapiro is Jewish, is pro-Israel, but he's also criticized Israel as well. So I'll have to say that. But JD Vance, I think a lot of people know that JD Vance behind the scenes is very critical of Israel, like a lot more than he shows, right? And then so when he runs in 2028, what if he ran against a Democrat who was less critical of Israel? What would happen then? What would happen to the young Democratic people? And you have Josh Shapiro, who's less critical of Israel than JD Vance is. Who do they vote for? If you're not, one of your top issues is Israel Palestine, and JD Vance is criticizing Israel more than a Democrat, what happens then? Um, I think those issues are a critical mass, and I wonder how it's going to affect how people vote. Will they be extreme? Will they look back for the best market basket issue that they want? Yeah, exactly, Tamara, exactly. Because these are really the big issues at the moment. Donald Trump is, I'm not saying Donald Trump is not important. He's still the president for the next 3 years, but I'm talking about moving forward. We're not going to be going up against Donald Trump. That I'm sure of. So now it becomes, what does the Democratic Party stand for? Is the Democratic Party a big tent of progressives and establishment people and people in between, right? Is the Democratic Party a party of no AIPAC, no Israel stuff, right? Because there is a conflict within the Democratic Party. A lot of it is age related, depends on what age you are. A lot of it, some of it can be, and that seems to be a big factor. There seems to be, we're discussing all of these issues right now to come to consensus and choose. Yeah, we are. Yes, exactly. Right now to come. Yes, exactly. And I think it's very important to discuss this because um, let me just give you an example. I think Australia is more progressive than America in general. To give you an example, I've said this before, right? Um, Barack Obama could have been a moderate in our centre-right government, right? A moderate in our centre-right government. So that just gives you an example of how more progressive we are in Australia in general than America is. I think America is generally more right-wing just in general. Even the Democratic Party, it's more right-wing, right? However, our centre-left government, which is the government I vote for, which is the Labor government, it's like the Democratic Party, but it's called the Labor government of Australia. You don't have people like the DSA in there. The DSA would not be in our centre-left government because because our centre-left government is a social democratic party, similar to what the Democratic Party is supposed to be as well, or centre left in America, in Europe, or it's centre left, right? So basically, you're capitalist, but you want strong safety nets, right? So that's what social democracy is. If you look at Scandinavia, that's social democracy. Scandinavia is not socialist; they're social democrats. They believe in capitalism, and I think one of the things I need to say is I speak to a lot of young people, also in America because I also do TikTok lives, so something else I do, and I speak to a lot of young Americans on there. Most of the people I speak to on TikTok live are Gen Z, and if I speak to a left wing person, a lot of them don't know what the difference is between democratic socialist and social democracy. They don't know the differences, and a lot of people are not voting on labels. They're voting on who they think is a better person for them, right? They're not voting. If you said to them, "This is what the DSA website says," most of them wouldn't know that, right? They like Soroman, they like these people, right? Now the question then becomes: is I have heard people on that side say we can't tell people what we really think because it would turn off like liberals, right? So we have to be like more mainstream, right? So I've actually heard people on this side say this, and people like Hassan Piker have said this. They said we have to be careful we don't shoot people in the veins with socialist stuff, like because it will scare them off. So they're deliberately staying away from conversations. But my thing is, let's just have an honest conversation. What is your goal? What is your ultimate goal? Are you talking about social democracy like we have in Australia, Europe, Scandinavia? Or are you talking about something more than that? I think it's fair to ask that question. If you want to be a member of a Democratic Party, which is not a socialist party, it's the Democratic Party. So let me go back to Australia, right? In Australia, we have a centre-left government who is more progressive than the Democratic Party, but is not socialist. And in Australia, because we have preferential voting, we have a lot of minor parties. Like you have the Greens on one side, you have One Nation, which is more far right on the other side. So the DSA in Australia would not be a member of our centre left party, it would have its own party. It would be a separate party, right? And then what happens is with preferential voting is that if you vote for the DSA someone who's a DSA member, you can then give a second preference. So you vote one DSA and you vote two Democrats. So therefore, your first preference goes to the DSA, but if they don't win the election, your vote will then go to the Democrats. So you don't waste your vote, right? And I think the problem in America is you have a two-party system, and therefore, like look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump had to come in and blow up the Republican Party. He had to come in and blow up the Republican because there was no other option for him, right? You have to do it within the two major parties. It's the same with the DSA. The DSA, it doesn't work. In America, third parties don't work. So therefore, they thought, we don't have a choice. We have to infiltrate the Democratic Party. But the truth of the matter is there's a very, very big difference, right, between a centre-left Democrat and a DSA member. A big difference. To the point in a lot of other countries, they wouldn't be in the same party, right? And I guess the question is how big of a tent is a Democratic Party going to be, right? Is it going to be a party where someone who talks like who says communist things is okay in the Democratic Party? Now, you can agree with that, you can say that, but you also have to understand that when you go, this might be good in primaries in New York, California, Michigan, right? Okay. But how does that transfer to a main election? How does that transfer to a main election? Right? Um, and so you have to look at the big picture, right? What if people the Democratic Party gets tainted as this extremist party? Now, I will give you the other side of that. And the other side of that is, well, maybe people don't care about labels anymore. That could be true. It could be true that people don't care about labels anymore. And therefore, when someone calls someone on the left a DSA member, they call them a communist or that people don't really care anymore. And also, I will say this, is that Trump calls everybody a communist, right? So even like he called Joe Biden a communist. I mean, Joe Biden could be anything further than a communist. He even called like Mitt Romney a communist. Mitt Romney is the most right-wing economic person, I think, in America, and he called him a communist. So what happens is you can overuse words, right? And then the words they lose their power. So if you hear everyone being called a communist, then communist doesn't mean anything anymore. It's the same with racism. If you call everybody a racist, then when someone's called a racist, they're like, oh, whatever. You call everyone a racist. Using words too much they can lose their power and lose their meaning. Which is why whenever I call someone a racist, I make sure I have something to back it up. Because I don't want the word to lose its meaning. When I call someone a Nazi, I want to make sure they're actually a proper Nazi, not just a right wing guy. Because again, if you call everyone a Nazi, the word loses its meaning. They're like, oh, I'm Nazi, you call everyone a Nazi. So what? Oh, communist, you call everyone a communist. So, we have to be careful with words. We have to be careful because 20 years ago, if you called someone a communist, it was a big deal. 20 years ago, if you called someone a fascist, it was a big deal. Now we hear it 100 times a day. Nobody cares. The word doesn't mean anything anymore. So I think that's a negative thing myself. But yeah, so going back to the Democratic Party, I think from that point of view, I think the Democrats need to work out who they are, right? Who they are as a party. And I don't know the answer to that. As I said before, I will just say that in Australia, the DSA would not be in our centre-left government. It just wouldn't be. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's just the way it is. I think preferential voting for me is a really good thing. I think it's always been a good thing um, from that point of view. So yeah, and look, he's like Abdul's El Sayed. He's doing well in Michigan. He's doing much better than Haley Stevens. However, when it comes to going up against Mike Rogers, the Republican, he's a lot of the polling is showing he's just behind a bit, right? Just behind, just by a little bit. So it's within the margin of error. So again, I saw one poll that showed Haley Stevens polling better against Mike Rogers than he was, but I don't know. It was pretty close. All the polling's very close, so I don't know. But look at someone like James Tallarico. James Tallarico in Texas. I like James Tallarico. I'm a fan of his. James Tallarico is not a member of the DSA. He's like a centre left, right, Christian guy, but he comes across as progressive, but he's also more mainstream. And in Texas, if he was a member of the DSA, he would never ever get elected, right? But a lot of people look at James Tallarico and they see him as outside of the mainstream, even though his politics is not that far to the left. So it just goes to show that it's sometimes not so much about not about what you call yourself, but your charisma. I think charisma is a big thing these days with social media, how you present yourself, right? I think they're very big things these days. The days of the bland politician is, I think, over. You do need charisma these days. You can't just be like a bland person. The reason is because of social media. On social media, you these days as a politician, you have to talk a lot more, right? You have to talk a lot more these days as a politician. And you can't just go on CNN or Fox News anymore. You have to you have to engage with people on social media. So you have to show a lot more of your own personality. And you have to show a lot more of your personal life as well. So for that reason, the charisma of a politician can make a big deal in terms of that sort of thing. Yeah. Tallarico just finished an interview with Rachel Maddow. Oh, okay. I didn't see that. I didn't see that. Yeah. But yeah, I really like James Tallarico. In Texas, the tactics in Texas were always they did this with all the Democratic parties, Democratic candidates before, is to make them out to be like they're not manly enough, right? That was it. Like you're not manly enough to be a Texas senator. That was their honestly that was their policy, right? To try to emasculate the Democrats, say that he's too feminine. They do that with Tallarico. He doesn't eat meat. He doesn't eat meat. Oh, that's who gives a that's just the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing. Um, but it doesn't seem to be working. Now, I will say the reason I don't think it's working is that people don't realize is that over the last couple of years in America, Australia, and Europe, is that demographics are changing, right? Demographics are changing in the sense that the biggest demographic block now is Gen Z and millennials. And Gen Z and millennials don't care as much about whether someone is super masculine or not. And it's not like Tallarico is not masculine, he's just his own type of guy, whatever. But I will say that, it doesn't matter as much to that generation. So the generation that it mattered to the most was like the boomers or Gen X. And they're no longer the biggest voting bloc. So Tallarico is now fighting in an area where people are much younger and they don't think the way their parents do, right? So therefore, it's not working as well with Tallarico as it did with previous people. So the demographic change is a big thing that's happening. And I think that's the way, like in Australia, a lot of politicians now are now catering to young people instead of the older people. Because before, boomers, right, Gen Z is more open, unbiased. Exactly. And so is millennials. And so are millennials, Karen. Yeah, as well. And so from that point of view is I don't think people say the Republicans are using tactics that did work in the past when the majority of the people in Texas were boomers or Gen X. But that's no longer the case. It's now the majority of the people in Texas are now Gen Z and millennials who don't have this idea of you have to look like, I don't know, some redneck to be considered masculine. So the demographic changes is working against this idea of what the Republicans think is to be a man, right? And that's happening, and that demographic change is happening all around the world, right? So they're playing an old game with new people, and that's not going to work. And that's why I think Tallarico is doing so well because, they're fighting a losing battle. And every year there will be less boomers, and there will be more people who are Gen Z who are added to the voting thing. So every year, uh, countries will become more progressive just because of the demographic changes. Yeah, from that point of view. Yeah. So yeah, interesting. Well, unless there's something else anyone would like me to talk about, I might head off soon. If anyone's got any other questions or anything, let me know. I might head off. I'll probably head off soon. But yeah, I just want to say that um, I'm really hopeful for the Democrats to win the midterms. I think they're going to do very well. I think they're going to do very well. The Senate, I think, is 50-50. I still think they're going to do pretty well in the Senate. I don't know 100% sure they're going to win. But the House looks like it's definitely going to be going. The House definitely looks like it's going to be going, which I think is very positive thing. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate that. And I hope to talk to you soon. Bye bye. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys.